Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining.
Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant. Insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Marc Gasol jersey retirement ceremony. Plus, I will talk about the game against the 76ers that was played that night. I will also talk about the win over the Pistons on Friday night. Before we get to it, just a reminder, if you want to support the creation of this show, do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. If you join my Patreon, you get access to exclusive bonus content. You get an extra episode a month. You can also join the Slack channel. You can join the Grits and Grinds exclusive Slack channel where we talk about the Grizzlies all day long around the clock. Whenever you want to talk Grizz, there are some fans in there. I am also in there to talk with you. So if you want to support the show, do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right. The Marc Gasol jersey retirement ceremony was on Saturday night. I feel fortunate that I got to go. Not only was it, I felt like a great ceremony honoring Marc Gasol, but it was basically just a reunion and a remembrance of the core four. It was the first time that Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph, Tony Allen, and Mike Conley had been together since the 2017 season. Apparently, I find that hard to believe, but I guess that's true. It's what everybody's saying. But beyond honoring the individual legacy of Marc Gasol and his career, it felt like a retrospective for the grit and grind era. And it was some kind of just really beautiful remembrance of like, hey, this was cool. Now we're all here thinking about it. And you just got to reflect on that 7-year playoff run and the connection with the city. And of course, Marc Gasol being probably arguably the best player in franchise history. Of course, he leads the Grizzlies or is top 2 for the Grizzlies in almost every major statistical category. And so Marc was there. And also his brother, of course, Pau Gasol was there. There were former Grizzlies, Rudy Gay and Mike Miller. And I think kind of summing up how it felt like a celebration for, yes, the grit and grind era, but honestly, just like the era of the Grizzlies in Memphis, it's because you had the majority of the most important players in Grizzlies franchise history there. The top 5 players in minutes played in franchise history were all there. That's Marc Gasol, Mike Conley, Zach Randolph, Rudy Gay, and Pau Gasol. And then Mike Miller, he was there. He's 7th in minutes played in franchise history. The only player not there in the top 7 in minutes played is Shareef Abdul-Rahim. And of course, he never played in Memphis. That's just from the Vancouver era. Then if you look at win shares, and like win shares, not a perfect stat. They're a cumulative stat that try to divvy up who gets what credit for a team winning. So like the longer you play, the more win shares you get. But in the building for the Grizzlies on Saturday night, you had 11 of the top 12 players in franchise history in win shares, if you don't include Shareef Abdul-Rahim, who never played in Memphis. For the Memphis era, you had 11 of the top 12 players in win shares in the building. Those players in order, from most win shares to least. You had Marc Gasol, and then Mike Conley, Pau Gasol, Zach Randolph. We were missing Shane Battier. He's the only guy in the top 12 in the Memphis era in win shares who wasn't there in the building. So then you had Rudy Gay, Tony Allen, and then current Grizzlies players, Jaren Jackson Jr., Ja Morant, Brandon Clark, and Desmond Bane. So you had basically all of the best Grizzlies players ever. I mean, maybe we're ignoring some of the greats of like the early Hubie days. I mean, Jason Williams maybe, Eddie Jones. I don't know. But like statistically, the top Grizzlies ever, they were all there. Except for Sharif, who never played in Memphis, and Shane Battier. I assume Shane Battier was busy. So you got to see that personal reflection of each player. You got to see the honoring of Marc Gasol, the jersey going up. All of it was very, very cool. And again, I felt super excited to be there. They once again recognized some of the things you saw in that Marc Gasol documentary about Marc's personality, and some of it was a little bit of a retread, just talking about how maybe he wasn't the easiest guy to get along with, and he had trouble hiding his emotions, but all he cared about was playing the game the right way. He cared about winning, and everyone just appreciated that. So we got to see the jersey lifted up. By the way, if you don't know, if you haven't seen it, the old Zach Randolph jersey retirement, it was like a plaque that looked like a record. That's gone. They replaced it with an actual jersey banner, something that looks like the white jerseys they used to wear at home. And so now you have Zach Randolph's 50 retired, Marc Gasol's number 33 retired. I kind of wonder what Mike Miller feels about it, because like Mike Miller, again, super important all-time Grizzlies player, also wore number 33. But overall, it was a very, very cool ceremony. Also there, you had maybe some bit players. Well, I don't want to call Tayshaun Prince a bit player. Like Tayshaun was there. Of course, he's an executive for the Grizzlies. Rudy Gay and Tayshaun Prince were sitting beside each other on stage. Of course, those guys were traded for each other. The back row of players, you had Bana Udra. You had Daryl Arthur was there. Quincy Pondexter and John Lure, who drove over from Nashville, much like me. John Lure coaches high school basketball in Nashville, Tennessee. Also, Dave Yeager was there. You had Nick Nurse. Of course, they're playing the 76ers, so Nick Nurse got to be there. Kyle Lowry, who was Mark's teammate. Kyle and Mark won the title together in Toronto, but some people forget that Kyle and Mark played on the Grizzlies together back in 2008 in Mark's rookie year. So all in all, it was a fantastic ceremony. It was a great event to be at, and it just felt like this celebration reflection of maybe the most important part of my fandom as a basketball fan, as a professional basketball fan. So I certainly enjoyed the evening. Now, as far as the basketball, yeah, let's talk about it. The basketball on Saturday night, not awesome. The Grizzlies saw their 3-game winning streak snapped. They did not suit up a competitive roster, and I'll be frank with you, I missed that one. I got this wrong. I thought, mistakenly, the Grizzlies would suit up a competitive team for the game against the 76ers. Mistakenly, I believed, hey, for that final important moment of the season when we honor Marc Gasol and retire his jersey, I bet just based on how the season is going, based on how some of these injuries have occurred, it looks like a lot of the guys are going to be healthy by then. And I assume like Desmond and Jaren, they'll definitely play. Of course, Santi Aldama would play. Why would Santi miss it? He idolizes the Gasol brothers. They'll both be in the building. Of course they're going to play. I mistakenly held this belief all the way through Friday's game against the Pistons, where Jaren and Desmond were out and Luke Kennard was out and like Conchar was still out. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. They're saving everybody for the second night of a back-to-back. We knew, looking at the schedule a month ago, 2 months ago, no one's playing on Friday night against the Pistons because they're all going to play on Saturday night against the 76ers. Wrong. Nobody played. Guys who you would even assume were absolutely certainly going to play, they didn't even play. Jake LaRavia was out. Lamar Stevens was out. The Grizzlies had to sign somebody an hour before the game to have enough bodies to play. They signed Timmy Allen an hour before the game. I mean, Timmy knew he was going to play well before that because he was there early warming up. But the team didn't actually announce the signing until after Taylor Jenkins made his pregame comments to the media. By the way, Timmy Allen played. He's the 32nd player to play for the Grizzlies this season. That sets a new record once again. A new NBA record. 32 players used for a team in a season. They had tied the Pistons, who, by the way, the Pistons the night before against the Grizzlies had tied them when the Pistons signed Jalen Noel, that was their 31st player, tying the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies edged back ahead with the addition of Timmy Allen. But the Grizzlies started Jordan Goodwin, Scottie Pippen Jr., Malachi Pereira, Gigi Jackson, and Trey Jimson. This was the Grizzlies' 43rd different starting lineup. The bench was Brandon Clark. At least Brandon played. The bench was Brandon Clark, Xavier Simpson, and Timmy Allen. There were times in this game where the Grizzlies had, of course, they had a 5-man lineup that was all 2 ways in 10 days. Basically, it'd be impossible not to. But there were times where they had more guys on the court who do skyhooks than shoot 3-pointers. They had 2 skyhook lineups when Xavier Simpson and Trey Jimson's on the court, and one player who shoots 3-pointers. It was a negative spacing lineup. Of course, the Grizzlies lost the game. They had 6 assists and 6 turnovers in the first half. That's hard to accomplish, to only have 6 assists in a half. They lost by 20 points. Joel Embiid had 30 and 10 in 20 minutes. He could have gone for 60 easily. The Grizzlies came to life a little bit in the third quarter. Scottie Pippen Jr. had a big third quarter. Scottie Pippen Jr. scored a career-high 24 in this one. I believe the Grizzlies cut it to 12 at one point and had a fast break. They had the ball down 12, and it's like, man, are we going to go to single digits maybe? But they had a turnover, and that was the closest they got. It was funny. If you're watching this game and you're a sicko and you actually care about what happens, I'm cheering for the Grizzlies to win. That's who I am. I like for my team to win. And there's times I feel like for those of us who were invested in the actual game, wanting the Grizzlies to win, where we were like, hey, can we put our good guys back in? And by good guys, we meant Scottie Pippen Jr. and Malachi Pereira. That's where we are now, where we're hoping for those guys to get back in the game. It's like, man, I think I've seen enough of Xavier Simpson. We got to get this 10-day guy, Malachi Pereira, back in there. He's our best player. By the way, Pereira's looked great. Maybe we shouldn't take basketball analysis from the past few games, but Pereira's a good player. And he's actually made a couple threes. So again, in the game against the Sixers, he had his first career double-double, career high 11 rebounds, had 13 points. Against the Pistons, he had 17 points and 9 rebounds off the bench. And the guy can play. And he made some corner 3-pointers of late. And if he starts making 3-pointers, then you start thinking this guy might actually stick in the NBA. This guy might not just be a fringe 10-day guy or a 2-way guy. He might be someone who gets on a real contract, on a real roster spot. Because if he makes a 3-pointer, then all of a sudden he becomes sort of like Kenrich Williams or a Larry Nance Jr. sort of player. So I've been super impressed with Pereira. I think take him on a 2-way over Jordan Goodwin. This is despite all of Jordan Goodwin's rebounding exploits that he's been on recently. Pereira has been super impressive, but he wasn't impressive enough to make this game anything but the farce that it was. The Grizzlies lost by 20, okay? And guess what that means? That's right. The Grizzlies set a new franchise record for the most 20-point defeats in a season. This is their 18th game of the year. They've lost by 20 points or more. That is the most for any team in the NBA this season, but that breaks a tie that this team held with the 1995-96 expansion Vancouver Grizzlies. So now this year's Grizzlies have the most 20-point losses in a season in franchise history. The next closest amount in the Memphis era is 2008. The team had 13 20-point losses. The 76ers, they won a game in Memphis for the first time since 2012. This thing was ugly. Honestly, the joke I made there was maybe Marc Gasol, you think maybe he was scouting players for his Spanish club, Basket Girona, for next year? Could some players who played in this game play in the ACB next year? I think it's possible. Or maybe down the line. Anyways, not much more to say, I don't think, about the game, about the blowout loss. Just that one, I was wrong, that they would actually suit up some of their guys. Maybe Luke Kennard, Desmond Bane, maybe Jaren. Maybe we'd actually do a dress rehearsal for what the team might look like at times next year. All right, we gave up hope on Marcus Smart coming back, but what about Zaire Williams? Zaire Williams, in my mind, is fighting for his life. He's fighting for his NBA career to make a team. He's still too hurt to play. Does he play in the final 4 games or 5 games? I don't know. Anyways, I was wrong about the Grizzlies fielding a competitive roster for this game. I think that joins my other very wrong analysis / prediction that I made after the All-Star game, which was I didn't think the Raptors would lose 15 straight games to pass the Grizzlies in the tankathon standings. I did not think the Raptors would lose that many games in a row to just have a 45% chance of keeping their pick. I was wrong on that. I was wrong that the Grizzlies would have a competitive roster against the Sixers. They also did not have a competitive roster against the Pistons, but it didn't matter. They destroyed the Pistons. Get this. The Grizzlies have 18 losses this season by 20 points or more. The win against the Pistons was their biggest win of the season. It was by 18 points. In this game, they achieved their biggest lead of the season when they pulled ahead by 27 in the third quarter. And then they finished with the biggest winning margin of the season. 18 points. That's right. The Grizzlies have no 20-point wins this year. The only 2 teams without a 20-point win this year, the Grizzlies and the Pistons. Making that number even more, remarkable, as when you look at the previous 2 seasons, in the 2022 and 2023 seasons, the Grizzlies had 30 wins by 20 or more points. That's tied for the most in the NBA over that span. The Celtics and the Grizzlies over the last 2 years, the previous 2 years, had 30 games where they won by 20 or more. This year, the Grizzlies have 0. But they do get this big win. They hold the Pistons to 90 points. That's the fewest points the Grizzlies have allowed in a game this year. Trey Jimson went off. He had 17 points and a career-high 13 rebounds. His first career double-double. His first career International Paper Player of the Game. Congratulations, Trey Jimson. He led the team in scoring, also tied with Malachi Pereira. They both had 17. This was the first time the Grizzlies won a basketball game where they didn't have a player score at least 20 points since April 1st, 2021. So almost 3 years to the day. On that date, the Grizzlies beat the 76ers, and Dylan Brooks led the team with 17 points against the Pistons on Friday night. I mean, it was a fun game. It was a beatdown of the Pistons. The Pistons should be humiliated for their performance. The Grizzlies had 7 guys in double figures. Lamar Stevens had 15 points off the bench. He scored 11 in the first quarter, so he was a big spark in the first quarter. Got a nice dunk off of a steal in that first quarter. One thing about Lamar Stevens' game, and perhaps this analysis is totally out of place, recording a basketball podcast the first week of April, but one maybe negative streak that Lamar Stevens has going on right now is in Lamar's last 5 games, he has more field goal attempts in each game than points scored. Like, he had 15 points in this one. I'd say he had a good game. Tied his career high with 3 steals, had 15 points, 8 rebounds. Good job. Good game, Lamar. But it took him 16 field goal attempts. And that's 5 consecutive games where he has more field goal attempts than points scored. And he's actually played 18 games this year on the Grizzlies. In only 8 of those games does he have more points than field goals attempted. So I like how Lamar Stevens plays. I don't want you to mishear me. I enjoy watching him play. I love how tough he is and how much he competes. And it's not necessarily that we care that much about the shooting efficiency. Somebody has to shoot. And Lamar does not back down from the moment. He's not Luke Kennard doing these 4 field goal attempt games. No. Lamar Stevens is being aggressive and he's putting the ball up on the rim. So somebody has to do that. Maybe we get a little too obsessed with efficiency. So I'm not like totally down on Lamar, but consistently having more field goal attempts than points, not great. So just something to keep an eye on. The win over the Pistons was the Grizzlies' 3rd win over the Pistons this year. That's right. They swept the Pistons 3-0. Of course, this is the first time ever the Grizzlies have played any Eastern Conference team 3 times in one season. So the Grizzlies are the first Western Conference team to beat the Pistons 3 times in a year since the Kansas City Kings did it in 1978. That's the last season the Pistons were in the Western Conference. Of course, if you're very confused right now, the Grizzlies played the Pistons 3 times this year because of the in-season tournament, where the Pistons and Grizzlies lost all their group play games and both ended with some of the worst point differentials, so they were matched up during that week where they had to schedule everybody out extra games. Another thing of note, I think, in the Pistons game was something that their opponent did. That's Malachi Flynn. Malachi Flynn went scoreless against the Grizzlies. He missed all 12 of his field goal attempts. And the reason that is notable, it's not just that that's the most attempts in any game this season, or tied for the most attempts in any game this season without a make for any player. It's notable because in Malachi Flynn's previous game, he scored 50 points. So Malachi Flynn followed up his 50-point explosion with a 3.0 for 12 performance against the Grizzlies. Also from that win against the Pistons, G.G. Jackson had 15 points. In that game, Scottie Pippen Jr. had 16 points, 7 assists. He tied his career high with 4 steals. Xavier Simpson, he's been struggling. I mean, he's more of a novelty player, but his shooting has not worked out. And weirdly, it's been the 2-pointers. He was 1 for 5 on 2-pointers against the Pistons and missed all 4 of his 3-point attempts. Against the Sixers, he was 1 for 8 on 2-pointers, but he managed to make 3 out of 4 3-pointers against the Sixers. None of it makes any sense. I'm not taking anything away from these games other than G.G. Jackson looks okay, and I've been very impressed with Malachi Pereira. By the way, G.G. Jackson's stats had 17 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals against the Sixers, and 15 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds against the Pistons. Looking ahead for the Grizzlies, they play the Spurs on Tuesday night, and we are now, I feel like, after this Marc Gasol retirement ceremony, we're shutting it down. We're circling the drain. I don't really expect many of the guys who've been out to return. Maybe, again, Zaire Williams, who's trying to prove that he's better than Jake LaRavia, should play, but I don't know. The Grizzlies play Spurs on Tuesday, second out of a back-to-back. They have to play the Cavs, and then the final 2 games are against the Lakers and the Nuggets. I guess we can watch the lottery standings. The Raptors have won 2 straight games, but the Grizzlies still have 2 more wins than those guys. So if the Grizzlies lose out, you need the Raptors to win 2 of their final 4 games. They play the Pacers, Nets, Heat, and Heat. Could they win 2 of those? I mean, it's possible, but that would just get you a tie, and then there'd be a drawing to see who finishes with the better lottery odds if you both finish at 27 wins. Anyways, it was a great Marc Gasol retirement ceremony. I'm happy the Grizzlies beat the Pistons. I enjoy a win. The game against the Sixers, who cares? I guess totally meaningless basketball. Unfortunately, we've been cursed with a lot of meaningless basketball, but there are brighter days ahead, we assume. Anyways, go watch that Marc Gasol documentary if you haven't seen it yet. Go watch the interview I did with the director, Michael Blevins, that I posted on the YouTube channel on Friday. Anyways, if you want to support this show, do that at patreon.com. Appreciate everybody who listens. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right. Hope you guys have a great Monday. I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz.